Telnari Station 3 wasn't the most exciting post in the Galactic Confederation's civil infrastructure lattice, but that was the point. Assigned to planetary logistics regulation on a colony where cargo manifests rarely changed and weather patterns were fixed by orbital stabilizers, Relin Vass was exactly where she'd wanted to be, safe, steady, and respected. She had a desk with a view of the settlement's central dome. Her compliance metrics were immaculate. She had a pension path, a clean uniform, a daughter enrolled in a well-ranked remote sciences academy. Which was why the salvage notification slip on her terminal that morning seemed like a clerical error. She almost dismissed it, until she noticed the delivery had been routed directly to her residential quadrant. Not commercial depot, not educational materials processing. Home. She scrolled through the digital receipt. 72 kilograms of composite hull paneling, 2 defunct power cells from a decommissioned mining trawler, and a manually signed receipt under recipient, Voss, Kira. Her daughter. Relin blinked. It had to be a prank. Kira was 15. She still needed help formatting her academic reports. What would she be doing with hull plating? The walk home took 11 minutes. She tapped out a disciplinary email draft the entire way. It wasn't until she stepped into the backyard that she understood the full scale of what had been happening. The vessel wasn't large by fleet standards. Maybe 8 meters, nose to tail, partially concealed beneath an old solar tarp. But it was clearly a ship, built by hand, with parts she recognized from old infrastructure lots, illegal scrap markets, and, most concerningly, a few pieces she could only identify from GC salvage clearance archives. Kira had welded the fuselage together with neat seams, reinforced the lower panels with repurposed shuttle plating, and strung power lines through what looked like irrigation tubing. The hull bore the faint outline of an old Terran tactical spec, Warthog class. There was a cockpit. There was a working thrust vector. There were cooling vents and life support tubes. The engine looked patched together but connected. The thing wasn't just theoretical. It worked. Kira was underneath the frame, shoulder deep in some kind of cooling matrix, humming. She didn't see her mother until she stood directly beside the wing. "What is this?" Relin asked, her voice cold and flat. Kira didn't flinch. "It's a skiff. A warthog. Technically only a light class, but I've got reinforced spars and dual-cycle intake." "You built a combat skiff in the yard?" "Technically," Kira said again, standing and wiping grease off her fingers. "It's an independent salvage configuration. Low profile, quick launch, good for fringe maintenance." Relin's mind couldn't find a stable foothold. "You're 15. I'm 16 in 4 weeks. Relin stared at her daughter, then at the ship, then back at her daughter. "Where did you get clearance for any of this?" "I didn't," Kira said. "But the codes for most of the power core subsystems were public access. A lot of the rest I translated from Terran archives." "Human manuals? You use Terran tech?" Kira's grin wasn't even sheepish. "It's not like anyone else publishes free modular retrofitting guides." Relin stepped back, too stunned to speak. She circled the ship in silence, noting the clean lines, the subtle detail work in the sensor cowling, the improvised landing struts. It wasn't perfect, but it was far from dangerous. It was capable. "You're done with school," she said eventually, not a question. "I passed the core curriculum. The rest is specialized. I'm not wasting another cycle on system admin coursework. You're on track for fleet logistics. You could have interned with civil data flow." Kira just stared at her. "I don't want to audit import numbers for 8 hours a day, filing metadata around a conference table while someone drones about gravity permits." Relin's voice turned hard. "And you think flying around on some Terran death trap is a career path?" Kira didn't yell. She didn't even look upset. "They don't wait for permission. They see a problem and they do something. You taught me to fix things. This is fixing something. For me." The words lodged like a shard in Relin's chest. She'd thought her daughter was fascinated by engines, like a hobby. Not this. Later that day, she tried to unravel the whole thing. Backtracking cargo records, tracing unauthorized material movement, scanning Kira's academic logs. Every answer raised more questions. Some of the components had been rerouted from decommissioned colony equipment. Others had been acquired through barters with off-grid recyclers. A few items, like the military-grade interface cable coupler, were logged under educational demonstration models. which was such a bald-faced manipulation of the permit system that Relin almost laughed. She didn't, though. Instead, she filed 2 internal queries under low-priority review status and stared at them for 10 minutes before deleting them. The next day, she confronted Kira again. This time, the girl handed her a folded slip of paper. It was an acceptance notice from a human salvage crew, based out of Jexian orbit. The apprenticeship was for non-combat maintenance and atmospheric drop work. It had been signed 4 days ago. "You applied to join a Terran crew?" Kira shrugged. "They saw the schematics. They said I had potential. I figured I'd say yes before they changed their minds." "You can't," Relin started, then stopped. She wasn't sure what followed. Can't leave? Can't be like them? Can't be better than this? Over the following week, Relin spoke to neighbors, school officials, even her shift supervisor. They all had the same reaction: concern, disbelief, a little disgust. Terrans don't follow protocol. They're reckless. They break things. But Kira, calm as ever, had said something different. They also fix things no one else can. Relin didn't have a response to that. Not yet. Relin stood in the doorway of her home, arms folded tightly across her chest, watching her daughter run a diagnostics loop from the open cockpit. The ship's power core gave off a quiet, stabilizing hum. Kira sat inside, legs crossed, fingers dancing across a jury-rigged interface board covered in mismatched Terran labels and repurposed GC wiring. She looked focused, comfortable, at home in something Relin couldn't name. "You built a weapon," Relin said flatly. Kira didn't look up. "I built a skiff." "It's a warthog. That's a gunship class. You know that." "It's multi-purpose," Kira said. "Original design was for asteroid tow. It got adapted." Relin stepped closer. "You built a war machine in our yard, with black market scrap and unsanctioned engineering specs. And now you're leaving to work with a salvage crew that isn't even part of the fleet." Kira finally turned. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look proud. She just looked calm. "I didn't build a war machine. I built something that works. You could have died." "I didn't. You could have caused a cascade failure in the neighborhood grid. We have children 3 doors down. I routed everything through an isolated power buffer. The draw's lower than our laundry processor. You don't have clearance." "No one does. That's why the manual was in Terran." She paused. "They don't wait for permission. They just build it, and then it works." Relin opened her mouth and closed it again. The phrase echoed in her mind. They don't wait for permission. It was the kind of thing people muttered during staff meetings as a complaint. Now it was something else. She didn't argue after that. Not right away. Not with words. Instead, over the next few days, she watched. Quietly. From the window. From across the garden. From just inside the frame of a doorway while pretending to check weather reports on her slate. Kira didn't just tinker. She debugged sensor arrays, ran stress tests on welded joints, and made micro-adjustments to a balance algorithm for a ship that wasn't even supposed to exist. She calibrated ducted fans using a makeshift test rig and grease-scrawled equations on the patio stone. She filed small notches into scrap panels until they sat flush along uneven seams. There were no instructions for any of this. Just sketches, notes, practice, and something else. Something Relin hadn't seen in a long time. Pride. Not the loud kind. Not defiant, just steady, quiet satisfaction in every movement. The kind of pride that didn't ask for approval. That existed with or without it. 3 days later, the human salvage crew arrived. They didn't land dramatically. No banners, no horns. Just a quiet old freighter marked with faded hull numbers and a painted crescent moon over an arc of tools. It didn't match anything in GC fleet databases. When it touched down just beyond the western field, the ground barely shook. 3 figures stepped out. 2 wore patchwork flight suits with unaligned emblems. The third, older, balding, with a stained shirt and a datapad, walked with the casual authority of someone who'd survived more than one crash landing. Kira sprinted out to meet them. Relin followed at a slower pace, half expecting noise, swagger, or maybe an inappropriate joke. But when the Terrans saw the warthog, they didn't laugh, or whistle, or nod in mock approval. They stopped, and stared, long and slow. Then the old one muttered, "Stars below. She built this?" Kira beamed. Most of it. Some of the compression loop came from an old dome recycler. One of the others crouched beneath the landing struts. Is this plated with recycled prefab? That's actually smarter than fleet issue. Takes stress better. The older man walked up to Relin. His handshake was short and firm. Ma'am, Captain Tev Kor, you're the mother? Relin nodded. She's got instinct, he said simply. Not just talent. Knows where the seams should go before she puts them there. You don't teach that. You just hope someone grows up with it. Relin didn't know what to say. The third crew member, short, broad-shouldered, maybe a decade older than Kira, tapped the warthog's hull with the back of her hand. Honestly, that thing's better reinforced than some of ours. You let her do all this with garden tools? I didn't let her do anything, Relin said without much force. They didn't smile at her. They nodded with a kind of quiet respect. Then they asked the question that caught her completely off guard. You want a tour? Relin blinked. What? The ship, Tev said. Nothing classified. Just a look. You might want to see where she's going. She didn't say no, but she didn't say yes. She looked past them to Kira, who was already deep in conversation with the other crew, pointing out the fuel line junction and explaining how she'd reinforced the lateral fins to survive sharp re-entry angles. No, Relin said eventually. Let her have this. They loaded up 2 crates, one of tools, one of food. Then Kira hugged her mother, long and fast, and climbed aboard without looking back. By the time the ship rose over the yard, its engines flaring blue-white in the waning light, the warthog was silent. The tarp fluttered in the wind. The backyard was quiet. Later that evening, Relin walked out to where the ship had sat. Just an impression in the dirt now. A few bolts, a grease stain, a line of melted gravel from a too-hot thruster. She went inside, opened Kira's old room, and pulled a dusty, grease-smudged book off the shelf. The title read, Modular Systems Optimization for Improvisational Pilots, Unofficial Edition, Terran Print. She flipped through the first few pages, frowned, then kept flipping. The next morning, she placed an order for a low-grade Terran toolkit, not for inspection, not for confiscation, not even for repair, just to see what it felt like. If you enjoy my stories set in the GC universe, you can now buy Tales from the GC Volume 1 in Kindle and paperback format off Amazon. It would mean the world to me if I sold a few copies, or even if you just flick through 1 or 2 of the stories on your Kindle Unlimited subscription. The links can be found in the description below. Thank you. The next GC story will be out soon.